Welcome, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. I am Donna Bales, and I'm the founder of the Canadian RegTech Association, and I will be your host today. We are returning for the second year, and we are here with an amazing group of women panelists to have another engaging and inspiring discussions to hear a little bit about their personal journeys, but also how their journeys intersect with RegTech. Last year, we had a really interactive discussion. We had lots of Q&A, and I encourage you all to put a question in throughout the session, and we'll endeavor to answer it along the way. This year's focus, we have narrowed it down. Last year, we talked about women more generally, about women in technology. This year, in conjunction with Crime Fraud Protection Month, we're going to focus on financial crime. So we've got three amazing, inspiring women, and I'm going to pass it over to each one of them to just make a short introduction before we get into the main discussion. So Marie, can I start with you?
Yes, and hi everyone, and I just want to thank Donna and the Canadian RegTech Association for having me today. Just based on the messages I've received, I know it's a topic that is of interest for a lot of people, at least in my network. So just quickly, my name is Marie-Andree Malo-Mongeau, or Marie. I'm a trained CPA, but I've been in the financial crime space for approximately 10 years. I'm currently the Senior Director AML Business Effectiveness for CIBC. So I oversee our transaction monitoring from an AML and terrorist financing perspective. I am also very involved in some of our inclusion and diversity events and committees. So really happy to be here today for International Women's Day. So I'll pass it over to Tara.
Hi, everybody. Happy International Women's Day. I just wanted to say, like, today is really about stopping the bias, and I'm so grateful to be part of this panel with my esteemed colleagues. It's just been great to get to know everyone a little bit better and to hear about their experiences as powerful women committed to making a change. A little bit about me. I've been over 20 years. I now stick to the 20 years because I feel anything more, we just have to maintain a little bit of mystery in both industry and consulting. I've worked in the business line or the P&L, and then funny enough, I found my heart's calling in a control function, which a lot of people find kind of interesting, given kind of my personality, and that was in anti-money laundering. I have all kinds of degrees and a commitment to, forwarding my education, and as well as being a consultant in the financial crime and compliance practice at Sionic. I am a small business owner dedicating to help our communities most vulnerable. And it really is an intersection with the work that I do at Sionic, because it's about protecting our financial system. And by doing that, you protect communities. And like my Marie, I am part of our diversity, inclusion, and equity committee, and so just really committed to making a change through action. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine.
Hi, happy International Women's Day. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today, especially my esteemed colleagues. I am the head of AML Solutions for Quantexa, focusing on the Americas in the banking sector. I have over 15 years of experience in both the private and public sector in financial crimes, particularly in the AML and sanctions space. And it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you here, and also to have two of our members. For those of you who don't know about the Canadian RegTech Association, we're a not-for-profit, and we focus on bringing together the industry to solve regulatory challenges and really look at how we can solve regulatory challenges. And our key stakeholders are regulators, financial institutions, and RegTech firms. And so, like I say, we have Quantexa, who's a member, and also Sionic, and also CIBC. So it's fantastic group of women. And I want to just delve right in because there's so much to talk about today. And you've heard a little bit about their kind of professional experiences, but I want us to dig a little deeper into your actual professional journey, and what perhaps like highlight some of the highs and lows that you had throughout your career, maybe some sliding door moments. Maybe Marie, we could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to begin with, I've had the privilege of having really strong female role models in my entourage, and I'll give a little shout out to my mom, who I know is watching, and really that helped me. Shape me into the woman I am today. And when we talk about my career path, I've also benefited from mentors, female and male, as well as sponsors more recently in my career. And that really made a huge difference. So first, I'll start with some of my mentor relationships. And a bit of background as to how I got these mentors. Some of them were, I'll call them prearranged relationships, where I had a people manager really identify, based on my background and based on where I wanted to go in my career, really strong personalities and executives that could help me move along that path. And I've also had mentors where the relationship was just born, I want to say, naturally. So as a result of either close interactions or projects, or previous people manager relationships. And really, what I found for this to be beneficial, at least for me, is these relationships had to have a fit. There had to be a personality fit for me to get as much valuable guidance as I needed. And also both parties needed to be really committed. And what I mean by committed is you need to make the time. This is a relationship you need to nurture. And people need to show up so you get the most of it. And as a mentee, I want to say that some of these relationships were not effective. And understanding what is a good relationship and be really honest about, is this the right one for me? Is this what I really needed? Was a big learning in that journey. For the relationship and the mentors that really helped me, it was then very simple. They were just able to really challenge me in my thought process, to advance my career, to enhance my leadership skills, and increase really the robustness of my profile based on where I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. And sometimes these are not easy conversations, but these are the conversations you need to have to really move forward. And before I pass it back on to you, I also want to make sure that people also pay attention to the sponsors in their lives and the sponsors in their careers. And really, I see this as different than a mentor, because a sponsor is really there to advocate for you. So they actively promote you and they create these opportunities to really expand the depth and breadth of your skill set. And one of the big learnings I had was to also understand in my career where maybe I didn't have the sponsorship that I needed to get to the next level, and how to get it. And if I didn't get it, was this the right role for me? Was this the right environment for me, or did I need to move on? And really, I know that this is an area where it's been more difficult for women to get sponsors or actively seek sponsorship because of lack of representation. But this is definitely something that I see is changing as more firms are looking to grow that internal talent to get women and other niche talent in executive roles. So really here, Donna, this has been key for me, and I know that I've had a really good growth in the last 5 years of my career, and I really own it to my efforts, but also to these sponsors showing up for me.
Yeah, the sponsorship is very important because they need to know you, right? That at that level, and so you need that advocate. May I ask, just before we pass it on to Tara, is at what point in your in your professional career did you meet your first mentor or sponsor?
Well, I want to say that it actually was very early on, where my dad actually introduced me to one of his friends that was in the business world. And this first relationship really helped me identify what I wanted to do in university, the type of careers that may fit with my personality. And this really helped me. And then subsequently, as I got new roles, I was obviously able to find some mentors within each organization that I've worked for.
That's funny. My dad introduced me to my first mentor too. So Tara, tell us a little bit about your professional journey and some of the ebbs and flows and sliding door moments.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. That was really insightful. I'm going to be kind of do it a little bit differently, and I think that's what's great with sharing the panel with these ladies. You know, I'm so grateful to be where I am right now and doing work that I'm passionate about in the financial crime space, because I really feel it's making a difference and protecting our citizens and the financial system. But kind of working my way through the journey, I really took like a reflective kind of thought about my career. And the highs for me were working with leaders that were supportive of me as a person. You know, that type of environment accelerated my creativity and ultimately my performance. And it's because I was able to be just me. And so when I'm my authentic self, I thrived. And I love to see that products, services, and solutions that I created back then are still having an everlasting impact on the organization. And I think when you're able to be yourself, you're also able to be vulnerable. And I know if some of you watch The Bachelor, they talk a lot about vulnerability in relationships, but in a work context, it's really about being able to receive positive as well as negative or constructive feedback. And when you're able to receive that feedback, you can elevate your functional and as well as your behavioral competencies. And then with that, you take calculated risks because you feel safe. Now I'm going to go to the dark side. And I worked for a couple of leaders, and I'm going to use the phrase that they use in HR. It's called command and control leadership. And under that kind of environment, and I want to say it's almost suffocating because I felt nervous, I was unconfident, and I felt like I was in a no-win situation. Success was given away. If I made success, the success was taken from me. And if I made a mistake, it was all my fault. So then you almost have like an inertia in kind of your performance. You're like, you start questioning, what do I do? Where do I go here? And then with that, your performance as well as your total well-being is impacted. And I think when I look back on those dark times, like when you're in it, it's very difficult. But as a person and as a leader, I took from that, who do I want to be as a leader? How can I help others? How can I break the cycle of biasness? And what I learned through those darker times is that I had tenacity, resiliency. The uncomfortableness made me have the courage to take risks. And there were people around my orbit at that time, family, friends, and some leaders in the organization who gave me the courage to say, and Marie talked about this, I could make a change. You know, get out of the situation that you're out, do something different, and take a leap of faith. And what I want to pass to the group is that you can be okay. You can get out of the situation and you're going to be okay. And that is really kind of my sharing with you about my own experiences.
Oh, thank you, Tara. It's hard to do, but change is good and can be very positive. Jasmine, so over to you. Like, you know, Tara and Marie have both talked a little bit about personal journey, mentorship. What would you like to say in terms of how your careers progressed and any advice on sponsorship or mentorship?
I think both Marie and Tara made some very good points. Marie, particularly when she was talking about sponsorship and mentorship and really having someone get to know you. Unfortunately, early on in my career, I did not have those opportunities. And in many instances, I didn't even think that was something to be, relevant or valued. I remember being in university, and I got an A in some sort of history class. And I later went back to the professor to ask her for recommendation, and she said no. And I was shocked. I thought, I have perfect grades. Why wouldn't she give me a recommendation? And she said, I don't know you. And it's so critical to ensure early on, whether it's through that internship or those classes, it doesn't have to be everybody, but find one or two people, find something that you might be interested in. And then, echoing Tara's comments, if you don't have those things, even later down the road, you need those characteristics of tenacity, of pushing forward. And really for me, it was that, this was a burgeoning industry, fin crime, people thought about maybe drugs, Scarface, this isn't something people were thinking of post 9/11. I got into it by chance, and that I was focused on the Middle East. I had spent some years out there and focused on that region, which ended up being, a huge area of concern to many, and particularly for banking and the sanctions space. And this is how I managed to get into this area, and have been in it ever since. But there was no traditional trajectory or person who helped shepherd me through that process. And I think now for those, who are on the call, who are listening in, if you're just starting out in your career, get as much knowledge as possible, try to do as many certifications as you can. Don't be afraid, just in general, you may not know everything on the topic, but be out there, be out there and try to do whatever you can to be involved, because those qualities are so important. And, don't let no discourage you. And in general, ask for forgiveness, not permission. A lot of times, many females feel that they have to know everything about, a topic, or they wait for some sort of natural gap in a conversation, or think someone's going to ask them their opinion. But you know what, in a room full of men, a lot of times they're not going to ask you your opinion, and you have to break through in those conversations and make yourself known through your knowledge and your intellect.
Can I just add on to that, Jasmine? I wanted to add about you talked about mentorship, and it's building on what Marie talked about, mentorship and sponsorship. To be quite honest, for my career, kind of like you, Jasmine, I didn't have, I can say, 2 female mentors within my career. I'm talking in a work context. I've had a lot of powerful women around me, from a community, friends, family members, that kind of thing. And I felt that the women around me were more, and I want to call it a transient relationship. And what that meant is, as long as I worked for them, they were supportive of me as a mentor. But really going through the organization and sponsoring me, kind of putting their name and associating it with mine, it was more the men kind of mentors, sponsorships, who helped kind of shepherd me throughout my career. And that allowed me to be promoted and achieve higher levels of success. And when I reflect on it, and I did actually while preparing for this, I think that those female leaders, they had biases lodged onto them within their own careers. And so it was easier for them to be more neutral. So if they stay neutral, if there is a negative impact, it lessens the propensity of it to fall back onto them. And so they just didn't want to put themselves in a more vulnerable position, because they didn't want it to negatively impact their career. So that's kind of been my experience. And like what Jasmine said, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because we have so much to talk about, but how to change, the conversations now, us as female leaders, and what we can do on a go forward basis based on what we learned.
Yeah, and that's kind of ties into the theme of International Women's Day and trying to break that bias. And we will come back to that topic. But just before we do, I wanted to take a poll, because we've talked a lot about mentorship and sponsorship. And we're just going to put up a poll here in a second. And if you could just let us know, if you've had a mentor or sponsor. We're just waiting for the poll. But the question is if you have had a mentor or sponsor, or if you've had both. The poll will come up in a minute. I've actually, mostly had men mentors and sponsors throughout my career. Don't know why, no reason, maybe because the industry I was in, but it's very, very lucky. They gave me a lot of support throughout a lot of change, and I still have them in my life. So here's the question. Do you have a mentor or sponsor? So you can just say, answer that when you have a minute. We'll leave this up for about 30 seconds or so. And I also encourage everybody to throw in some questions. If you have any, we'll try to answer them throughout. We wanted to.
And while we're waiting for the poll results, I just want to go back to one of Jasmine's comments on chance. Sometimes I tell some of my coworkers or my team members, you have to create your chance. Sometimes it is because you're taking opportunities, you're taking a leap of faith, going to a networking event, attending a course, cold email or cold calling someone to talk about their journeys. And sometimes that chance comes from other people, and they may be aware of opportunities that you're not. They may see something in you that maybe you're not seeing yet. But being open to really listening to these proposals or these opportunities can really make a difference, especially if you're early on in your career and you think that you had like maybe one or two roles, like I have a very narrow skill set and I don't know how I'm going to get to the next level or to another industry. Well, you may have transferable skills. Create that chance, create these relationships, and you're going to be rewarded. You're going to see benefits from them.
Thanks. Sorry, we had a slightly technical on the poll question because we did a test before and it kind of screwed out the sequence, but I think we have the results in. People just hold them for a second and, oh, there's the results. Okay, so 54% do not have a mentor or sponsor.
That's pretty telling.
Yeah, that is very telling. You know, our organizations, the organizations I've been at, often they have, leadership groups and women in tech groups and things like that. And that's really telling to still see that. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for participating.
I just want to add on to that. And I think, Marie, you talked about chance. I think right here, if you don't have a mentor or sponsor, take that chance, have the courage to go to somebody that you may admire, and take proactivity within your own career and maybe ask them. In sales they say if you want to have that sale, if you don't ask, you don't get. So ask and maybe reach out. Now LinkedIn is a powerful kind of tool. If you see people that you're impressed with, go out there and look for it on your own, or like Donna said, within your organization there are a lot of committees. Maybe volunteer and become part of those associations or committees. I just thought I would bring that up just to empower yourself for change.
Absolutely. And I know from a CIBC risk management perspective, we've stood up a mentorship program as part of our inclusion and diversity action committee. So there might be programs that are already set up for you and you just need to register. And sometimes it might be as well having a good discussion with your people manager, because a people manager is not necessarily a mentor is not necessarily a people manager. But see if based on where you want to be in your career, if they have a network that you can leverage, because sometimes it is hard to make that first call, but maybe they can do an intro and then after off you go and you're set up for a potential successful mentorship relationship.
And just to add to that, seeing the results of the poll, which are not surprising, and we're focusing a lot on this subject, of course, it's valuable to have a mentor or sponsor, but you're your best advocate and you always will be. And so don't forget that. And ultimately, you have to make things happen for yourself. No one's going to do that for you. No one's going to, be as forceful in terms of pushing for your own success. And so I think it's so essential to, as Marie said, and Tara as well, just find those avenues, take those courses. Don't think that you have such a limited skill set that you can't expand into another area. And, there's always opportunity. There's always opportunity. And whether it's by chance and being in the right place at the right time, or, attending various functions, different groups, there's just so much out there today, and you can make it happen for yourself.
I think someone suggested too, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my colleagues who's a leader at Sionic. She's saying, reach out to us as panelists. We're here, feel free to hook up, or as they say, link up with us on LinkedIn. So we're here, we support the empowerment of women. So we're another avenue.
Thank you, Tara. Marie, I wonder, we just have a question, if you could answer this one. How would you describe the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
So I may not have the scientific definition, but I go to my mentor for guidance on decisions, next step for my career, bouncing off ideas, talking about challenging situations, and maybe build my plan. I look at my sponsor as kind of a little army fighter for me as well, right? So there's a component where your sponsor is working a lot behind the scenes, understanding what your goals are and understanding what you can bring to an organization. It's really creating these opportunities based on their network, based on some of the committees they may be on, and really have a loud voice at the table on your behalf. So one is obviously with the whole personal and growth development. One I also see as an action, like as someone that's making things happen for you. Sometimes your mentor and your sponsor could be the same person, depending on the level of influence they have in the organization, depending on the relationship, and depending on the type of opportunities that you're looking for your career as well.
And as Jasmine mentioned earlier, is that you can also be your own sponsor, so that's perfect. Thank you, Marie. Our question now is, let's focus a little bit on the theme of International Women's Day, which is bias and breaking bias. Maybe we'll just all do this symbol and symbol of solidarity here for breaking the bias. And it comes in nicely to a question that we got, and maybe Tara, you could answer this one. How do we avoid confirming stereotypes while still challenging bias?
I think it's about basing, your decisions on facts. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So really kind of not on your perception of how things are, but are on the facts. I think that's one thing. The other thing too is when you want to challenge bias, and I'm going to talk about this, it's really about using your voice. We all have a voice and we all matter, and you can be that leader or champion for yourself and for others. So if you hear someone say a microaggression in a meeting, use it as a teachable moment. And to show your solidarity with that individual. The quiet person in the room, again, about a bias or a stereotype, inviting them to say their opinion when they're sitting in a meeting. Like Jasmine said, you're showing those kind of leadership kind of competencies every day, and it's about action, and that's really what it's about. Hiring more people, if you're in a position of leadership, hiring more women into roles. We talked about this a little bit, encouraging them to take on a new skill or ability, or going for a promotion, even if they haven't served the time as women. And I'll speak a little bit about myself. We tend to stay in roles longer than our male counterparts, or like Marie had said as well, like we don't fully appreciate all that we bring to the table. So as a leader, encouraging someone, or as a friend, as a soul sister, say, hey, I think you'd be great for this, go for it. And they're like, well, I've only been in my job for like 12 months. You can do it. You have it. So being that champion, I think it's really about action. and action with how you treat everyone, and action how you make everyone inclusive, and action basing information on facts, not on assumptions, because we all have bias. And I want to stop on that for a minute. We all have them.
Mhm.
And with the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls recommendations, quote, with truth comes reconciliation. What that simply means, if we all understand that we all have biases and we make the conscious effort to recognize our own and others, then we can make change.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. Marie or Jasmine, I wonder if you might expand a little bit on, I think, Marie, you are actually a representative of diversity inclusion, in your organization. Maybe how are some of the things that you're doing within your organization to make it a more diverse and inclusive environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's strategies across key pillars. So when we talk about recruiting, when we talk about talent management, when we talk about the general awareness and culture as well. So key initiatives, just in regards to the bias, there's obviously training that's formally given to people leaders, and this is not meant to be online training where you check and then move on, but really training focused on experience sharing and discussions to really make an impact on people. What we've seen as well is maybe two quick initiatives, and I'll pass it on to Jasmine. Reverse mentorship and mentorship programs. So we've talked about a bit about mentorship. Reverse mentorship is when some of our leaders are mentored by someone from a underrepresented segment or diversity segment, so they can learn about some of the impacts of the bias on people, and they can tailor their behavior, they can learn, and eventually they can adjust as well in terms of their leadership style. And the second one is something that we're launching soon for risk management, so I'm really excited about these. They're inclusive leadership circles. And they're meant to be small circles where risk management professionals are exposed to some of our executives. And they're a safe, small settings for people to learn about the executive's path, but also being able to share their journeys and really talk about growth and really talk about culture, and for all participants to learn and really get something positive out of it. So it's to Tara's point, this is ongoing work as well, right? Recognizing it is one step, but then how you adjust, how you learn, and how you keep really an open mind and a flexible mind is really how your culture is going to shift and be a sustainable inclusion and diversity culture.
Thank you. Jasmine, do you want to have anything to add? I was thinking I'm going to move on a little bit to our second half of the program, which I think you have a lot to say. Do you want to just wrap this one up with some final thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick thought on that as well in terms of bias. Obviously, bias does exist and it will continue to exist. And as Marie said, it's an evolving process. I do think sticking to the facts and trying to steer clear of what those typical stereotypes are helps. However, at times, you're going to find that I think stereotypes are still going to exist and you may face that regardless. And I think, again, as long as you add value within your organization or continue to show through your output, whatever it is, the strength in what you do and what you bring to the table, I think any of those biases will slowly fall away because people will get to know you and understand and appreciate you more as an individual and not just thinking of you in terms of your gender or your background or whatever preconceived notions they may have about you.
Can I just add to that just one last thing? I know, Donna, we have to move on. I'm proud to say that at Sionic, we're just like CIBC. We do have a diversity, a DEI, equity, and inclusion committee. And one of the things, to Jasmine and to Marie's point, is that if you have a strategy and a roadmap, so deliberate, saying, okay, what do we need to do across the organization? And then you have goals, like everything, if you have goals, short-term, medium-term, long-term, and it's established throughout the organization, you're going to see, that change when it's considered as something that's important and valuable for everyone.
Thanks, Tara. I'm just going to move on a little bit because it's March is a busy month. It's not only an International Women's Day today, it's Fraud Prevention Month. And as many of you might know, females are often victims of fraud and human trafficking. And just to give you a sense of the scope of that, I'm just going to provide a few statistics that actually Tara provided me. 95% of human trafficking victims were women and girls. This is the source, by the way, is Public Safety Canada. So these are Canadian statistics. Over 2/3 of human trafficking from 2009 to 2019 were reported in Ontario. And 43% of all victims of human trafficking were between the ages of 18 and 24. So, I mean, this is a real issue. And we're lucky today to have like 3 women leaders who have, dedicating their career, in this area. I just wonder, before I want to go into some of the solutions and some of the RegTech solutions, I wonder just, Tara, if you might just add a little bit, provide a little bit more context, there from those stats.
Sure. I think simply stated, what this means is our most vulnerable community members are more likely to be a victim of some type of crime, and in Canada, around the world. And sadly, women are more likely to experience this crime. And one of the statistics that I got today is the fact that almost 25% of women are likely to experience persistent poverty. And what's happening now, like with the world that we're living in, extreme poverty, marginalization, COVID have caused the highest rates of human to human crime. And I'm going to give you even more stats because it's startling, because this impacts all of us. So 1/3 of women suffer globally from sexual assault, sexual harassment, and domestic abuse. 42% of women have experienced discrimination in the workplace, and that includes unequal pay, under promotion, or workplace harassment. So this is more than about financial crime. It's about our community well-being. And it really is important for all of us to protect each other and the most vulnerable community members. And we all have a role to play. And I talked a little bit about that earlier. And our daily actions can make a difference and create a ripple effect to protect others. So, those are startling facts, and it gives us some somber kind of to think and reflect. And the work that we do, and Jasmine, she's going to talk just about the technologies in place to protect our most vulnerable. It's just really important because at the end of the day, through financial crime, a lot of women are impacted on the downstream effects. So we really need to kind of get those bad actors out there and protect our financial system as well as our communities.
Yeah, the extent of the issue, we really need really strong solutions. And yeah, Jasmine, just turning to you, can you speak a little bit about the solutions that you have at Quantexa and how particularly they are suitable for fighting fraud and human trafficking, and maybe opine on one of a case study or two?
Sure. I moved into the vendor space a few years ago, particularly for this reason, to try to use my background and knowledge to bring that and helping to create and bring forth these solutions to the financial institutions that not just are regulated, but are able to detect these crimes, which, as you mentioned, are perpetrated against women in large numbers. And some of those areas, whether it's forced labor, human trafficking, other types of scams, romance scams have actually now become, probably, I've seen a statistic recently, 65% are usually women. And also younger women have now become more victim to these scams, considering the situation of the last 2 years with COVID, online dating, people aren't meeting in person as much. These scams have increased, and it's very unfortunate. And at Quantexa, we are really doing pioneering and wonderful work to try to combat these issues and work with financial institutions to try to detect and monitor for these activities whereby legacy systems, the systems of the last 2 decades, rules-based systems, have been very challenged in terms of finding this type of activity, because criminals are very sophisticated and they're aware of the rules, whether it's different thresholds, value, volumes, other types of rules that have traditionally existed in the fin crime space. And so they bypass these rules. And whether it's through now, artificial intelligence, graph analytics, networks, visualizations, all these things come together in order to provide better tools for the people in these financial institutions who are doing their best to find this activity, report it to law enforcement, and pursue that. And one of the things I'd want to highlight was a case that we did at Quantexa. We were working with a financial institution, and through our contextual decision intelligence and networks, we were actually able to connect and piece together a sex trafficking ring in Europe. And it had involved multiple men. For example, the indicators and what you would normally see, there's so many. And how do you connect those dots from all the disparate data sets that you might have in an institution? And you do that by using technology like Quantexa, because you can take third-party data from nonprofits, from corporate registry data, from other sources, use that with your internal data that you have on your customers, and with that create a network and a view that can reveal these types of activities. So in the instance that we worked on, there were multiple men, typically of a certain age range, numerous originators, the amounts had the same patterns, and the middle management, sadly, as people have probably seen in films and other shows, are actually usually women. They're middle-aged women who at some point have potentially been trafficked themselves, but then have now been, almost to the point of the victimization, is that they are now actors as part of the victimization of further women by acting as madams, as in-betweens, as providing and receiving smaller amounts of money that then they buy, all the different types of things that are needed to house and clothe and shelter these women. And the victims usually are the same nationality. And we can, again, using all of these types of attributes, typologies, combining it with outside external data, we're able to piece together a ring and bring that to the attention of this financial institution. And of course, law enforcement as well. Once they were aware of it and contacted law enforcement, this was something that was shut down. And so the power of Quantexa and again, other innovative technologies to detect this activity has never been more important, as we have all these new types of payment methods. And of course, there's digital currency and other aspects of activity going on today. So that's just one example that I've seen, and there are many more.
Yeah, the threats out there just don't seem to abate. And if you haven't seen Quantup, the graph technology that Jasmine's described, we're going to have send out a video next week of how that works, and it's very powerful. Marie, I just wondered if we could just pass to you, like from a financial. You're at a financial and you kind of see it from a slightly different lens. Like, is there anything you can share and in terms of what you see and how RegTech may be an enabler?
Yeah, absolutely. So just as well to level set for the audience that may not necessarily be aware of our obligations as financial institutions. So from a Canadian perspective, we need to file suspicious transactions report to FinTrack, our regulator. And basically that means that if we suspect that there's any proceeds of crimes and potential money laundering or terrorist financing, we need to identify the transactions, write a narrative, and submit it to FinTrack. So when it comes to identifying and combating human trafficking, we need to send as much intelligence as we can. Hopefully our FIs don't facilitate these, but if we need to send that information to FinTrack so that in return they can send it to law enforcement. And the benefit that FinTrack has is that they're going to get information from CIBC, from RBC, from TD, from MSBs, and they'll be able to build on that network to then inform law enforcement for them to take actions. So in line with what Jasmine was saying, I really believe that the biggest lever we have from an FI perspective is our use of data, advanced analytics, and modeling. And it doesn't mean that it needs to be complex, but really, we need to have that infrastructure to be able to, one, train our front lines and our second line of defense effectively so they can identify the criminal activity or potential criminal activity, and feed us good data for us to understand what does the pattern of transaction look like. We need to be able to have strong risk assessment processes to be aware of what are the new techniques that people are using. And we have to have that strong data to put them together and say, well, what's the best way to generate an alert? And an alert is basically, we think that there's something unusual, let's look into this. But we want to go beyond the just we think it's unusual. We want to really tailor it and narrow it down to, we think there's potential proceeds of crimes related to human trafficking. So based on what we've seen, and we've changed our angle a little bit for these types of I'll call them like the community more impactful crimes. So human trafficking, drug trafficking being some of them, where we're trying to trace the criminal journey. So if I was a pimp, how would I behave? What would I ask of my victims, of the madams, to introduce the funds in the financial system? How can someone pay for these services? What do we see for people on how they advertise it? And can we identify patterns that go back to some of the data we have to effectively launch an alert review or an investigation? So really, like, focusing on these pieces really helps us manage the analytics piece. And going to Jasmine's point as well on some of the discovery, eventually the better you have some of these indicators, the better base set you have. Obviously, you're trying to do, like, I'll call it supervised machine learning, where you have outcomes, you want to learn from them. But the more data you have and the better depiction of the risk you can also have, then that's when you can venture in unsupervised machine learning and saying, well, show us some, like, data, show us something that we may not have seen. And based on this, again, it doesn't mean that your indicators are going to be the more complex one, but at least you'll know that they'll be very effective. So if I give an alert to the FIU, I know that it's valuable work for them. I know that there's a high likelihood that we'll be able to submit a report to FinTrack, and they'll be able to transmit that intelligence to law enforcement. So RegTech here is really about that, for me, the use cases where we can leverage the data, where we can really see or detect patterns that we may have not, like, we may not have known. The criminals, I hate to say it, but criminals are smart when they're trying to launder their money. Some of them pretty straightforward, some of them pretty sophisticated. So let's try to be proactive using our data, using modeling, using network analysis and contextual graph to be as smart as quickly, and not having to wait for operational alerts that may take time to be published, and by the time that they're published, maybe the criminals have already changed transactional patterns.
I just want to build on that, just one thing, and then I'm going to pass it back over to Donna. On my social enterprise Truthtara, it's really about that, is using the information, leveraging what we do in financial crime to protecting our communities. So the same thing, having a community type of program where you can get help when you need it, like a community whistleblowing, and using that data, to what Marie said, to get these bad actors that are hurting people, but also the people that suffer from traumatic experiences. With Truthtara, they can get the help localized when they need it for themselves or for the people around them that want to protect them. And so really we need to be kind of really creative, and the answer lies within the data. And how can we leverage this to see kind of behaviors and patterns, and to really be the eyes and ears to help, protect our most vulnerable, and for our most vulnerable, the survivors and their advocates, to get help when they need it with the right resources, because there are resources out there.
Like, we're actually so lucky that the technology has advanced the way it has. It is a big enabler. This is like a real problem. Like, when you talk about, we have 9 RegTech categories that we classify. I see this as one of the most important, in that, you know, we're actually helping to solve real issues with the oversight. Just before we close up, we do have one more poll that we'd like to poll the audience, and it kind of forms on the discussion that Jasmine and Marie had. Like, what types of RegTech technologies is your firm using to fight financial crime? So knowledge graphs was one area that Jasmine talked about, robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, and modeling, as Marie and Jasmine spoke about, distributed ledger technology, otherwise known as the technology behind blockchain, or none of these, or non-applicable because you're not a firm that uses financial crime technology. So yeah, we're just going to leave that up for 30 seconds and then or so, and we'll get the answer. But because we've had such a, I mean, I always, these sessions, you could just talk forever because there's always such good speakers. But I think maybe we'll just wrap it up a little bit here on where, I don't even know which topic to talk about, but maybe each one of you could put some last words in, and on either topic, either talking about the importance of technology to fight financial crime, or some thoughts on professional development and what needs to change in order for women to break the bias and have smooth personal journeys. Just some final remarks on the thoughts, because we've covered so many topics, and I'm sure you didn't actually get to communicate everything that you wanted to say. Maybe Tara, we'll start with you.
Wow. Yeah, I always have lots to say. There's someone who asked first a question. Can I just address that just real quick, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. This individual has a background in law and saying, hey, I don't know where to start with career options. And having a law degree would be fantastic being in this space, because as Marie said, it's governed by a lot of regulations. The regulations are set by the government. So having a law degree, understanding how to interpret regulations and to help organizations navigate what their obligations are and to interpret them within their operational reality. I would say for this individual is that, you need to go for it. Jasmine talked about this, not a lot of women that are in this space, and there's so much opportunity from a career trajectory and purpose. If you want to work for industry like Marie does, there's lots of bank jobs. Go and look at the site, see what's up there. You're educated, you have a great background, have the courage to apply. Or you could go into consulting like myself. Jasmine's more on the technical side. You could go with a company like Quantexa. Like, there's so many opportunities to consult in more in a technical capability, or in consulting like what I'm doing with the great firm Sionic. I think someone else wanted to say something on that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe we could just.
We're always looking for people, so I'm going to put good people at Sionic. I'm going to put the plug in, Donna, before I forget there.
Yeah, let's just the answer to the poll results, just on the use of, so 36% using artificial intelligence modeling, machine learning, and the second, knowledge graphs and robotic process automation. So that's interesting data. Artificial intelligence actually is one of our key themes for the year for the RegTech Association. So we'll continue to bring programs out for that. Anyway, final remarks, Jasmine, what would you like to say to the audience just in these many topics?
I wanted to reiterate whether it's, in institutions when you're filing, or these alerts, and you might get mired if you're a practitioner already in the field with all of the aspects that go into the day-to-day job. Never forget that there are real people behind these crimes that are victims, right? And oftentimes women, right? Whether it's a scam or elder abuse or human trafficking or forced labor, all of this work, all of the software, all of these innovations, all the tools that are being developed and as we move forward are to attempt to thwart crime, right? And that's ultimately all these things that you do is for that purpose. I got into this for idealistic reasons. I'd like to say I'm still in it for idealistic reasons, to catch the bad guys, to continue down this road. And we need everybody from all sides, the financial institutions, technology companies, across the board, to harness all of that collective brain power to create and continue to push forward innovative technologies, especially, of course, women. Women are underrepresented in software industry and the technology sector. So it's an opportunity, and the opportunities are there, just as Tara mentioned and others. It's there, and I'm here. If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out. And it was great to be here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Final remarks, Marie.
So I'll leave people with a challenge or an action. So if for your personal development, take one step today, take one action to advance your development. It could be writing to your people manager to talk about your development. It could be email, like cold emailing someone to have a career chat. Do one action for you. And for the people managers or people that have positions of influence that are on today's call, identify one person that has a lot of talent and that you don't necessarily think is actively planning their next step or has the sufficient support to get to that next step, and work with that person for them to get on the next step.
Thanks, Marie. You got.
Can I add one more thing?
Tara.
I was going to build. I can't help myself. Oh my gosh. I just wanted to say, like, with that, it's through action. Like, action. Apply for these roles. They're out there. Come work with Jasmine, myself, Marie. Like, go for it. And have the action to disrupt the system by having open, honest conversations, right? These are difficult conversations. Have them. Have the conversation as a leader with your staff to address these issues, and create a safe place that everybody feels welcomed, that they can bring the best of themselves and help people to aspire that, whether it's you're a leader or it's just your colleague. Be that voice of encouragement. And I think that's really what it's about. And that's how you break the bias, is through action. And by doing that, you're protecting our communities. It's so important. There are people at the end of the crime with this, and we're all in this space because we care. And show your care for your fellow sisters, to the sisterhood, and also all the men that are out there joining. They're supporting us too. Without them, it's a team event.
Yeah, it's absolutely a community. The RegTech Association is a community. If you want to get involved with us, get in touch with us. We're always looking for people to get involved. Thank you very much, Jasmine, Tara, and Marie-Andree. It's been great discussion. As this is always a fun session. It's a little off piece than our normal webinars, but it's always a joy. Thank you very much. And for being here. Thank you for the audience for joining us. If you want to learn more about the association, you can look at our website at canadianregtech.ca. And the other thing I just wanted to highlight is our podcast. We have a RegTech Roundup podcast that you can get on any of your channels. And often we have people like you've heard from today speaking on all kinds of topics. We particularly do a couple a month because it's Fraud Prevention Month. You'll hear a few this month focused on financial crime. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day, International Women's Day, and we'll hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.